The detention facility on Kepler Station buzzed with nervous energy as guards rushed through the corridors. Emergency lights bathed everything in red, and the air recyclers worked overtime to clear the acrid smoke from the latest riot. Marcus Chen sat in his cell, back pressed against the cold metal wall, watching the chaos unfold through the reinforced window. He shouldn't be here. None of the humans should be here. But the Galactic Council had decided that humanity was too dangerous to roam free among the civilized species. Too violent, they said. Too unpredictable. So they rounded up every human they could find and stuffed them into facilities like this one, scattered across the galaxy like dirty secrets. Marcus had been a cargo hauler before the lockdown, moving supplies between the outer colonies. Nothing glamorous, but it was honest work that let him see the stars. Now he shared a cramped cell with 3 other humans, all of them counting days until they might see freedom again. If they ever would. The door to his cell hissed open, and Guard Captain Vex Tar stepped inside. The reptilian saurian was typical of the species that ran these facilities, cold, efficient, and utterly convinced of their own superiority. His scales gleamed under the harsh lights as he consulted his datapad. "Chen, Marcus, human designation 7749B. You're being transferred." Marcus stood slowly, his muscles stiff from the cramped quarters. "Transferred where?" Vex Tar's lips pulled back in what might have been a smile on a different species. Gladiator Pit on Zarian Prime. The arena masters requested specifically for humans. "Seems the crowds enjoy watching your kind fight." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. The gladiator pits were a death sentence wrapped in entertainment. Beings from across the galaxy gathered to watch condemned prisoners fight exotic beasts and each other for the amusement of the masses. Very few ever earned their freedom through combat. "Why me specifically?" "Your psychological profile indicates unusual stress tolerance and tactical thinking. The arena masters believe you'll provide good sport before you die." Vex Tar's translator gave his words a clinical detachment that made them even more chilling. 2 guards flanked Marcus as they escorted him through the station. Other prisoners pressed against their cell windows to watch him go. Some were humans like himself, their faces reflecting the same mix of fear and resignation that had become all too familiar. Others were members of various alien species, criminals and dissidents who had run afoul of the Galactic Council's strict order. The transport ship was a utilitarian affair, designed to move cargo and prisoners efficiently rather than comfortably. Marcus was shackled to a bench alongside 24 other beings, all destined for the same fate. The human next to him, a woman with short-cropped gray hair and military bearing, caught his eye. "First time in the pits?" she asked, her voice barely audible over the ship's engines. "Hoping it'll be the last time, too," Marcus replied. She snorted. "Name's Riley, former Marine before they decided we were all monsters. You?" "Marcus, cargo hauler." "Well, Marcus, the cargo hauler. Let me give you some free advice. In the pits, everything wants to kill you. The beasts, the other gladiators, sometimes even the arena itself. But if you're smart and lucky, you might survive long enough to figure out the game." The journey to Zarian Prime took 3 days. Marcus spent the time talking with Riley and the other prisoners, learning what he could about what awaited them. The stories weren't encouraging. Alien creatures bred specifically for combat, technological weapons that most species couldn't even comprehend, and gladiators who had been fighting for years with nothing left to lose. When they finally arrived, the first thing Marcus noticed was the sound. Even through the ship's hull, he could hear the roar of crowds and the clash of combat echoing from the massive arena complex that dominated the planet's surface. Zarian Prime had been built for one purpose: entertainment through violence. The processing facility was a maze of corridors and holding cells, all designed to strip away any sense of dignity or hope the prisoners might still possess. Marcus was given a basic medical scan, issued simple combat gear, and assigned to a barracks that housed 20 other gladiators. The barracks were a study in diversity. Beings from a dozen different species lounged on metal bunks or huddled in small groups, each bearing the marks of their time in the arena. Scars, missing limbs, and the 1,000-yard stare of those who had seen too much death were common sights. But it was the figure sitting alone in the corner that caught Marcus's attention immediately. The being was massive, easily 8 feet tall even while seated. Its hide was a deep blue-black color, marked with intricate patterns that seemed to shift in the light. 4 arms ending in clawed hands hung loosely at its sides, while a pair of smaller secondary arms near its torso held what looked like meditation beads. Its head was elongated, with multiple eyes arranged in a complex pattern that suggested sophisticated spatial awareness. "That's Korath," Riley whispered, having been assigned to the same barracks. "He's a Threnody. Their species used to be warriors before the Council pacified them. Been in the arena for over 2 years, longer than almost anyone." Marcus watched as other gladiators gave the creature a wide berth, their body language speaking of fear and respect in equal measure. The Threnody, Korath, seemed to radiate a quiet intensity, as if he were a weapon at rest but ready to spring into action at any moment. "How's he survived so long?" Marcus asked. "Skill, mostly, but also because he doesn't make alliances, doesn't talk to anyone, just fights when they tell him to and meditates when they don't." The first few days in the barracks were tense. Marcus learned the unwritten rules quickly. Stay out of others' business, don't show weakness, and never trust anyone completely. The arena masters kept them fed and healthy, but only because damaged goods didn't provide good entertainment. Marcus found himself fascinated by Korath, despite the warnings to keep his distance. The alien moved with a fluid grace that seemed impossible for something so large, and during the evening hours, he would perform what looked like combat exercises that were more like deadly dances. On his 4th night, Marcus made a decision that would change everything. While the other gladiators slept or whispered in small groups, Marcus approached Korath's corner of the barracks. The alien's multiple eyes tracked his movement long before he came close, but Korath made no threatening gestures. "I've been watching you train," Marcus said quietly, settling into a crouch a respectful distance away. Korath's translator remained silent, but several of his eyes focused on Marcus with unmistakable intelligence. "I know you probably don't care about making friends. Hell, maybe you don't even understand what I'm saying. But I figure we're all going to die in that arena eventually, so why not at least acknowledge each other?" Still no response, but Marcus thought he detected a slight tilt to Korath's head that suggested interest. "Back home, back on Earth, we had warriors too, different from your kind, probably, but warriors all the same. They had a saying, 'No one fights alone.' Maybe that's naive in a place like this, but I thought you should know that at least one person here sees you as more than just another killer." Marcus stood to leave, but a deep, rumbling voice stopped him. "Your species intrigues me, human." Korath's translator rendered his words in perfect standard galactic, though something in the tone suggested the translation couldn't capture the full meaning. "Most beings here see only death in the arena. You see something else." "What do you see?" Marcus asked. "Opportunity." The word hung in the air between them, laden with possibilities that Marcus couldn't quite grasp. "The arena masters believe they understand combat," Korath continued. "They think violence is simple. Strong defeats weak, fast defeats slow, many defeat few. But they do not understand the warrior's heart." "And you do?" Korath's laugh was like distant thunder. "I am the last true Threnody warrior. My people were poets and philosophers before the Council decided we were too dangerous. They broke our spirit but could not break our knowledge." Over the following days, Marcus found himself drawn into conversations with Korath that ranged from combat theory to philosophy. The alien spoke of his people's warrior traditions, of codes of honor that transcended mere survival, and of the deep spiritual aspects of combat that the arena masters could never understand. "They pit us against each other like animals," Korath explained during one late-night discussion. "But warriors are not animals. We choose our battles, we choose our causes, and we choose our deaths. So what do we choose here? We choose to show them what warriors truly are." The opportunity came sooner than Marcus expected. The arena masters announced a special event, a team combat scenario where groups of gladiators would face off against each other in a complex environment filled with obstacles and hazards. The winning team would receive better quarters, improved food, and most importantly, a guarantee of survival for at least another month. Teams were forming organically throughout the barracks, usually along species lines or based on existing alliances. But Marcus found himself in an unusual position. Most of the other humans had already formed their own group, and the alien gladiators showed little interest in working with what they saw as inferior creatures. "Partner with me," Marcus said to Korath the night before team selection was finalized. The alien's multiple eyes studied him intently. "We would be a team of 2 against groups of 5 or 6. The odds are not favorable." "Maybe not, but you said it yourself. They don't understand the warrior's heart. Let's show them what that means." Korath was silent for a long moment, his meditation beads clicking softly in his secondary hands. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a weight that Marcus felt in his bones. "My people have a saying. To stand beside a true warrior is to touch the face of the divine. I had not expected to find such a warrior among your species. Does that mean yes? It means you and I will show this galaxy what happens when warriors choose to fight together rather than merely survive." The team registration caused a stir among both the gladiators and the arena staff. A human and a Threnody, the 2 species that the Galactic Council considered most dangerous, volunteering to fight as partners. The arena masters were delighted. It would make for spectacular entertainment, regardless of how quickly the mismatched pair was eliminated. But as Marcus stood beside Korath during the final team briefing, he felt something he hadn't experienced since his capture. Hope. Not for escape or even survival, but for the chance to prove that some things transcended the brutal calculus of the arena. The other teams glared at them with mixtures of contempt and calculation. The odds makers were already taking bets on how long the human-Threnody partnership would last once the fighting began. Most gave them less than 5 minutes. Korath leaned down to speak quietly in Marcus's ear, his voice carrying undertones that the translator couldn't render. "Tomorrow, little warrior, we show them all what happens when someone stands fearlessly beside a true fighter." Marcus nodded, his hand unconsciously checking the simple weapons they'd been issued for the combat. Tomorrow would bring pain, blood, and quite possibly death. But for the first time since his imprisonment, he felt like he was exactly where he needed to be. The arena awaited, and with it, the chance to prove that humanity's greatest strength had never been individual prowess, but the courage to stand beside others when everything else fell away. The arena floor stretched out like a metallic wasteland beneath the morning sun. Marcus had seen it from the barracks windows, but standing on the edge of the combat zone was entirely different. The space was massive, easily the size of several city blocks, and filled with obstacles that seemed designed by a sadistic engineer. Twisted metal structures created a maze of hiding spots and choke points, while energy barriers flickered at random intervals, creating temporary walls that could trap or protect, depending on timing. Above them, the stands rose in towering tiers packed with beings from across the galaxy. The noise was overwhelming, thousands of voices cheering, booing, and placing last-minute bets on the outcome. Electronic displays showed odds and fighter statistics in dozens of languages, while camera drones buzzed overhead like mechanical vultures. Marcus adjusted his grip on the plasma rifle they'd given him. It was a basic model, designed more for show than serious combat, but it would have to do. Beside him, Korath hefted a massive warhammer that seemed almost too large even for his considerable frame. The Threnody had refused the offered ranged weapons, claiming that true warriors fought with tools that required skill rather than luck. "Remember," Korath rumbled, his voice barely audible over the crowd noise. "They expect us to fight like gladiators, desperate, brutal, without honor. We will show them something they have never seen." The other teams were taking their positions around the arena's perimeter. Team Crimson, led by a scarred draconian veteran, consisted of 6 heavily armed fighters who moved with military precision. Team Shadow was made up of stealth-class aliens who seemed to fade from view even in broad daylight. Team Brute Force lived up to their name. Massive creatures whose strategy seemed to involve hitting things until they stopped moving. 8 teams in total, 43 fighters, with only one team guaranteed to walk away alive. The arena master's voice boomed from speakers embedded in the walls. "Citizens of the galaxy, today you witness the ultimate test of survival. These condemned criminals will fight for the right to live another day. Place your final bets now." Marcus caught Riley's eye across the arena. She was part of the all-human team, and her slight nod conveyed both encouragement and the grim acknowledgement that they might have to fight each other before this was over. "Begin!" The signal echoed from every speaker simultaneously. Chaos erupted instantly. Team Brute Force charged straight toward the center, roaring challenges in their native tongue. Team Shadow melted into the maze of obstacles, becoming nearly invisible. Team Crimson moved with coordinated efficiency, claiming a defensive position near one of the weapon caches scattered throughout the arena. Marcus and Korath moved differently. While other teams either charged forward or sought immediate cover, they advanced steadily but cautiously, Korath's multiple eyes scanning for threats while Marcus covered their rear. They had discussed strategy extensively the night before, but seeing it in action was surreal. "Structural weakness in that barrier array," Korath observed, pointing to a section of flickering energy walls with one of his secondary arms. "We can use the power fluctuations to our advantage." Their first encounter came within minutes. 3 members of Team Venom had taken position behind an overturned transport vehicle, hoping to ambush other teams as they passed. They hadn't expected a human and a Threnody to approach from 2 different angles simultaneously. Marcus opened fire from the front, his plasma bolts forcing the ambushers to keep their heads down. Meanwhile, Korath had somehow circled around to their flank with impossible quiet for such a large being. The first the Venom team knew of his presence was when their cover suddenly exploded under the impact of his warhammer. The fight was over in seconds, but instead of finishing off the wounded aliens, Korath simply disarmed them and gestured for them to withdraw. "What are you doing?" Marcus called out. "Warriors do not slaughter the defeated," Korath replied. "Let them live with honor intact." The crowd's reaction was immediate and confused. Gladiators who showed mercy rarely lasted long, and the audience had paid to see blood. But something about the way Korath and Marcus carried themselves seemed to give even the bloodthirsty spectators pause. Their second encounter was more challenging. Team Iron Storm had claimed one of the central weapon depots and were using its elevated position to rain fire down on anyone who came too close. The position was nearly unassailable. Anyone approaching from ground level would be exposed to overwhelming firepower. "Ideas?" Marcus asked, as plasma bolts sizzled past their hiding spot. Korath studied the situation with the calm of someone solving a puzzle, rather than fighting for his life. "The depot's power source is external. those conduits running along the floor, if we could redirect the power flow. It was insane. Marcus would have to cross 50 meters of open ground under fire to reach the power junction, make technical modifications to alien technology he barely understood, and somehow not get killed in the process. Any sane person would have found another route or waited for a better opportunity. Marcus was already moving before he finished the thought. The first few steps were pure adrenaline. Plasma fire erupted around him as Team Ironstorm focused their attention on the crazy human sprinting across their kill zone. But then something remarkable happened. Return fire began coming from behind him. Korath had positioned himself to provide covering fire, and his aim was devastatingly accurate. More than that, though, the Threnody was moving too. While Marcus drew the enemy's attention, Korath was somehow advancing on their position from a completely different angle. Marcus couldn't see how he was doing it. The alien seemed to be using his understanding of the arena's structure to move through spaces that shouldn't have existed. Marcus reached the power junction just as his luck ran out. A plasma bolt caught him in the shoulder, spinning him around and sending him crashing to the ground. The pain was immediate and overwhelming, but he forced himself to focus on the control panel in front of him. Human hands, it turned out, were better suited to this kind of delicate work than the clawed appendages most species possessed. Marcus managed to reroute the power flow just as the sound of combat erupted from the depot above. Korath had reached Team Ironstorm. What followed could barely be called a fight. The Threnody moved through the enemy positions like a force of nature, his warhammer describing precise arcs that disabled weapons and shattered defenses without killing. When it was over, Team Ironstorm was disarmed and demoralized, but still alive. The crowd's reaction had shifted from confusion to something approaching awe. This wasn't typical arena combat. It was something else entirely. "Can you continue?" Korath asked as he helped Marcus to his feet. The shoulder wound hurt like hell, but it wasn't debilitating. "I'm not done yet." Their reputation was spreading throughout the arena. Other teams began to change their tactics, some trying to avoid the human Threnody partnership entirely, while others actively sought confrontation. But Marcus and Korath had found their rhythm now, moving together with increasing coordination. The turning point came when they encountered Team Crimson. The Draconian-led group had been systematically eliminating other teams with ruthless efficiency. They moved like soldiers, used combined arms tactics, and showed no mercy to defeated opponents. When they cornered Marcus and Korath near the arena's central structure, it seemed like the partnership's remarkable run was about to end. "Surrender now, and we will make your deaths quick," the Draconian leader called out in accented Standard Galactic. Korath's response was to plant his warhammer point first in the ground and spread all four of his arms wide in what Marcus somehow knew was a formal challenge. "I am Korath, son of Threnody, keeper of the warrior's way. Face me with honor or be marked as coward before all who witness." The formality of it seemed to shock Team Crimson. This wasn't trash talk or intimidation. It was something far older and more serious. The Draconian leader's eyes widened as he recognized the ritual challenge, and Marcus could see the moment when the soldiers' training warred with deeper cultural programming. "You offer single combat? I offer the chance to die as a warrior rather than a mere killer." What followed was unlike anything Marcus had ever seen. The Draconian accepted the challenge, and the two massive aliens squared off while their respective teams watched from a respectful distance. It wasn't the brutal, desperate fighting that characterized most arena combat. It was a dance of death that spoke to something fundamental about what it meant to be a warrior. Korath was faster than his size suggested possible, but the Draconian was experienced and cunning. They circled each other for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes, each looking for an opening that wouldn't leave them fatally exposed. The end came suddenly. The Draconian overextended himself on a lunging attack, and Korath's warhammer took him in the center of mass. But instead of the killing blow everyone expected, Korath controlled the strike, sending his opponent crashing to the ground but leaving him alive and conscious. "You fought with honor," Korath said, offering the defeated Draconian a hand up. "Lead your team well." The gesture sent shock waves through the arena. In the stands, the crowd had fallen almost silent, as if witnessing something they didn't quite understand but recognized as significant. The remaining members of Team Crimson helped their leader to his feet, and after a brief consultation, withdrew from the combat zone. Marcus realized that something fundamental had changed. They weren't just fighting for survival anymore. They were demonstrating something that the galaxy had apparently forgotten. The final confrontation came at sunset, when only 3 teams remained. Marcus and Korath faced off against Team Shadow, and inevitably, the human team led by Riley. The arena floor was scarred and smoking from hours of combat, and the surviving gladiators were all wounded and exhausted. But they were also different from when they'd entered. The vicious desperation that had marked the early fighting had been replaced by something more measured, more respectful. Teams acknowledged each other with nods rather than snarls, and weapons were held ready but not aggressively. "This is not how it was supposed to go," Marcus heard one of the arena announcers saying in a broadcast meant for the stands but audible on the floor. "The gladiators are showing restraint honor. The audience doesn't understand what they're seeing." Riley approached under an impromptu flag of truce. "Marcus, Korath, what you've done here today, it's changed something. Look around you." Marcus did look around, and he saw what she meant. The surviving gladiators weren't eyeing each other as prey anymore. They stood straighter, moved with more dignity, and looked like warriors rather than desperate criminals. "The arena masters are furious," Riley continued. "They wanted blood and brutality, not whatever this is." "What this is," Korath said quietly, "is what happens when beings remember what they are capable of when they choose honor over survival." The Arena Master's solution was to release the final challenge, a massive predator creature that had been held in reserve. The thing was the size of a building, with too many teeth and claws and an obvious hunger for flesh. It was supposed to force the remaining teams to either work together or die separately. Instead, it proved exactly what Korath had been trying to demonstrate all day. The 3 teams moved together without discussion or formal alliance. They positioned themselves to support each other's strengths while covering weaknesses. Marcus found himself fighting alongside beings he'd never spoken to, trusting them with his life while they trusted him with theirs. And through it all, Korath stood at the center of their formation like an immovable pillar. His warhammer sang through the air in precise arcs that kept the creature at bay while the others found firing positions. When the predator focused on him, the others provided covering fire. When it turned to deal with the ranged attackers, Korath was there to draw its attention back. It was Riley who found the creature's weakness, a soft spot beneath its jaw that could be reached with precise fire. It was one of the Shadow Team members who provided the distraction needed to line up the shot. And it was Marcus who took the killing blow, his plasma rifle finally proving its worth in the hands of someone who understood both tactics and teamwork. When the creature fell, the arena erupted. But the noise from the stands seemed distant and unimportant compared to the silence among the gladiators. They stood together in the center of the arena, battered and bloodied but somehow victorious in ways that went far beyond mere survival. "Warriors," Korath said simply, looking at each of them in turn. "All of you. Remember this moment, because today you proved that some things cannot be taken away by cages or arenas or those who would reduce us to entertainment." The arena masters were already announcing the next day's matches, promising even greater spectacles, but Marcus knew that something had fundamentally changed. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to choose between survival and honor, and he would not be facing them alone. The aftermath of the team combat brought changes that rippled far beyond the arena floor. Word of the unprecedented cooperation between gladiators spread throughout Xerion Prime's entertainment complex, carried by guards, maintenance workers, and even some of the arena staff who had witnessed something they couldn't quite define but knew was significant. Marcus woke 3 days later in the medical bay, his shoulder properly treated and his wounds beginning to heal. The first thing he saw was Korath sitting motionless beside his bed, apparently in deep meditation. The Thrinotes' multiple eyes opened as Marcus stirred. "The arena masters are displeased," Korath said without preamble. "We have given them a problem they do not know how to solve." "What kind of problem?" "The kind where the entertainment begins to think for itself." Over the following days, Marcus learned what Korath meant. The gladiator barracks had transformed from a collection of isolated individuals focused solely on survival into something resembling a community. Fighters who had previously viewed each other as future enemies now gathered in small groups, sharing stories, techniques, and something that had been absent for so long most had forgotten it existed: hope. Riley visited him during his recovery, her expression a mixture of amazement and concern. "You should see what's happening out there, Marcus. The guards are nervous. Gladiators are talking to each other across species lines, sharing food, even helping tend each other's wounds. Some of them are asking questions about things beyond just surviving the next fight." "What kind of questions?" "The kind that start with why and what if." The arena master's response was swift and predictable. They announced a new series of individual combat matches designed to break up the emerging sense of community by forcing gladiators to fight each other one-on-one. The message was clear: remember your place. Remember that you are here to die for entertainment. Remember that trust is a luxury you cannot afford. But something fundamental had shifted. When gladiators were called to fight each other, they did so with obvious reluctance and minimal brutality. Fights that should have been savage affairs became almost ceremonial, with competitors showing respect for each other's skill while avoiding unnecessarily damaging blows. The crowds noticed. Betting handles dropped as the outcomes became less predictable, and the violence less satisfying to those who came seeking blood sport. Complaints reached the arena management, who found themselves dealing with an unprecedented situation: gladiators who had rediscovered dignity in the face of death. Marcus was declared fit for combat on his 7th day in the medical bay. He returned to the barracks to find that his bunk had been moved next to Korath's without anyone asking or explaining. It was a small gesture, but it spoke to the subtle ways the gladiator community had reorganized itself around different principles. "They are planning something special for us," Korath informed him that evening. "The arena masters believe they can break what we have built by creating a spectacle too terrible to maintain honor through." "What kind of spectacle?" Korath's expression was grim even by his species' standards. "A hunt. They plan to release us into the arena with minimal weapons while unleashing multiple predator species. The goal is not victory, but survival, and they expect us to abandon each other to save ourselves." Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the barracks' environmental systems. "How many predators?" "Enough that cooperation becomes mathematically necessary for survival, but not enough that cooperation is likely to succeed. They want us to try to work together and fail, to show the galaxy that honor is a luxury that disappears when death becomes immediate." The hunt was scheduled for the following afternoon, during prime viewing hours when the largest possible audience could witness whatever message the arena masters hoped to send. 20 gladiators would be released into an arena that had been reconfigured as an artificial wilderness, complete with dense vegetation, rocky outcroppings, and multiple water sources. Stalking them would be 6 predator species, each chosen for different hunting styles and capabilities. Speed hunters that could run down fleeing prey, ambush predators that struck from concealment, pack hunters that used coordinated tactics, flying creatures that attacked from above, aquatic monsters that controlled the water sources, and a massive apex predator that could smash through most defenses. 30 minutes to survive, the arena master announced during the pre-hunt briefing. Any gladiator still alive when time expires will receive enhanced quarters and guaranteed survival for the next month. Work together, work alone, it matters not to us. Provide entertainment or provide corpses. Either serves our purpose. The gladiators were given basic survival gear, simple knives, minimal clothing, and small water supplies. No ranged weapons, no armor, nothing that would give them a significant advantage over creatures bred and trained specifically to hunt intelligent prey. As they were led to the arena entrance, Marcus found himself walking beside beings he'd learned to respect over the past weeks. Riley was there, along with 3 other humans. The surviving members of Team Crimson moved with quiet dignity, their draconian leader still showing the effects of his fight with Korath, but refusing any accommodation for his injuries. Representatives from half a dozen other species completed the group, each carrying themselves with the bearing of someone who had found something worth preserving even in the face of almost certain death. "Remember," Korath said quietly as they reached the entrance, "they expect us to behave as prey. We will show them that warriors choose their own fate." The arena had been transformed into something almost beautiful. Artificial sunlight filtered through a canopy of imported vegetation, creating dappled shadows that could hide either refuge or death. A stream wound through the space, and its clear water essential for survival, but also an obvious danger zone. Rocky outcroppings provided elevated positions that offered both visibility and vulnerability. The 20 gladiators spread out quickly but not randomly. Without discussion or formal planning, they began moving in a pattern that would allow them to support each other while avoiding bunching up into easy targets. Marcus found himself naturally gravitating toward Korath, but the Threnody gestured him toward a position where he could coordinate with Riley and the other humans. "All of us, or none of us," Korath said simply. The first predator made itself known within minutes of the hunt beginning. A sleek, cat-like creature with chameleonic abilities materialized from what had appeared to be empty ground, striking at one of the alien gladiators who had become separated from the others. But instead of finding an isolated victim, the predator encountered coordinated resistance. The nearest gladiators moved to support their companion, using improvised weapons and tactics to drive off the attacker without suffering casualties. The pattern repeated throughout the arena. Each time one of the hunting creatures made an attempt, they found not scattered prey, but organized resistance. Gladiators watched each other's backs, shared water and elevated positions, and fought with the kind of coordination that should have taken weeks to develop. The flying predators proved more challenging, attacking from angles that ground-based defenders struggled to address. But the gladiators adapted, using the rocky outcroppings to create kill zones where aerial attacks could be channeled and countered. When one of the creatures managed to wound a draconian gladiator, others immediately moved to provide medical aid and protection while he recovered. Marcus found himself in the stream bed when the aquatic predator made its move. The creature was massive, designed to grab prey from the water's edge and drag them down to drown. But Marcus wasn't alone when it struck. 3 other gladiators were positioned to provide support, and their combined efforts turned what should have been a quick kill into a prolonged battle that ended with the predator's retreat. "This is not going according to plan," Marcus overheard from the arena's broadcast system. The announcers sounded confused, almost frustrated. "The prisoners are displaying unprecedented coordination. This level of tactical cooperation should not be possible given their diverse backgrounds and the stress of the situation." 15 minutes into the hunt, the arena masters made their next move. The massive apex predator, a creature that stood 12 feet tall and seemed to be mostly teeth and claws, was released from its holding area. Unlike the other hunters, this one was intended to force a decisive confrontation that would break the gladiators' defensive coordination. The beast was everything the arena masters had promised, and more. It moved with shocking speed. For something so large, its hide was thick enough to turn aside most improvised weapons, and its hunting instincts were sophisticated enough to recognize and target the gladiators' defensive positions. But even faced with overwhelming force, the gladiators held together. Korath stepped forward to meet the creature directly, his improvised spear looking pitifully small against the monster's bulk. But he wasn't planning to fight alone. As the apex predator charged, the other gladiators moved into supporting positions with precision that would have impressed military tacticians. The battle that followed was unlike anything the arena had ever seen. 20 beings working together not just to survive, but to protect each other, facing down a creature that should have scattered them in terror. Every gladiator contributed according to their abilities. Humans provided tactical flexibility, Draconians offered disciplined fire support, others contributed speed, strength, or specialized knowledge. When Korath's spear shattered against the creature's hide, Riley was there with a replacement weapon. When the beast's claws raked across a gladiator's back, others immediately moved to provide cover while medical aid was rendered. When the predator tried to separate individuals from the group, the entire formation shifted to deny it isolated targets. The creature was powerful, but it had been designed to hunt prey, not fight an organized military unit. After 10 minutes of sustained combat, it withdrew, wounded and confused by opposition it had never encountered before. The final 5 minutes of the hunt passed in relative quiet. The remaining predators seemed to recognize that their usual tactics were ineffective against the gladiators' coordination. And the gladiators themselves had proven something that went far beyond mere survival. When the time expired and the arena's safety barriers activated, all 20 gladiators were still alive. Some were wounded, all were exhausted, but they stood together in the center of the arena with something that transcended victory. The crowd's reaction was unlike anything Marcus had ever heard. It started as confusion, grew into something approaching awe, and finally settled into sustained applause that seemed to come from a place deeper than mere entertainment. They were witnessing something unprecedented, beings who had rediscovered what it meant to be more than the sum of their individual parts. But it was the silence from the arena master's booth that spoke loudest. The entertainment they had planned had become something else entirely, something that challenged the fundamental assumptions underlying the gladiator system. "Warriors," Korath said as they were escorted back to the barracks, his voice carrying undertones of pride and satisfaction. "Today you proved that some things are stronger than fear, stronger than desperation, stronger than the cages others build around us." The weeks that followed brought changes that rippled far beyond Zerion Prime. News of the gladiators' unprecedented cooperation spread through underground networks, carried by guards who had been moved by what they witnessed, arena staff who had never seen anything like it, and even some spectators who left the arena asking questions they had never thought to ask before. Reports began reaching the Galactic Council of unusual developments in detention facilities across multiple systems. Human prisoners were demonstrating leadership abilities that challenged assumptions about their species' inherent aggression. Other species were showing unexpected adaptability when working alongside humans. Most disturbing of all, the entertainment value of gladiator combat was declining as fighters began treating each other with respect and dignity. Marcus stood beside Korath in their shared quarters 6 months later, looking out through the reinforced windows at the stars beyond Zerion Prime. The arena still operated, but it was a changed place. Gladiators who earned their freedom through the new cooperative challenges often chose to stay and help train others. Arena masters found themselves dealing with requests for educational materials, interspecies cultural exchange programs, and even philosophical discussions. "Do you think we've actually changed anything?" Marcus asked. Korath's meditation beads clicked softly as he considered the question. "Look around you, warrior. When we first met, this place was filled with broken beings who had forgotten what they were capable of. Now?" Marcus looked around the barracks, which had become something more like a community center. Beings from a dozen species worked together on projects that had nothing to do with combat. Artwork, poetry, technical innovations, and plans for what they might do if they ever regained their freedom. "Now they remember," Korath continued. "And memory is the most powerful force in the galaxy. Once a being remembers what they are capable of when they choose to work together rather than merely survive, that knowledge cannot be taken away." A chime indicated an incoming communication. The arena master's voice filled the barracks, but his tone was different from the harsh authority they had known before. There was something almost respectful in it. "Attention, gladiators! The Galactic Council has announced new policies regarding detention facility management. Effective immediately, all facilities will implement cooperative training programs designed to foster interspecies understanding and conflict resolution skills." The gladiators exchanged glances, some hopeful, others skeptical. But Marcus saw something else in their expressions. The quiet confidence of beings who knew they had already won the only victory that truly mattered. "It seems," Korath observed, "that the galaxy has decided to learn from what we have taught." Outside their windows, the stars continued their eternal dance, witnesses to the truth that Marcus and Korath had discovered together. That courage was contagious, that dignity was a choice no captor could take away, and that sometimes the greatest victory came not from defeating enemies, but from helping them remember what they were capable of becoming. In the end, one human had stood fearlessly beside a colossal alien warrior, not because he was unafraid, but because he understood that some things were worth facing fear for. And in that standing together, they had reminded an entire galaxy that the space between beings could be filled with understanding rather than violence, cooperation rather than competition, and hope rather than despair. The arena still echoed with the sounds of combat, but now those sounds carried a different message. They spoke not of death and desperation, but of life lived with purpose and dignity intact. And that, Marcus realized, was the most human thing of all. The ability to transform even the darkest circumstances into an opportunity to choose who you wanted to be.